November 9th, 2025. Just after sunset, everyday life along Japan's Sanriku coast was shattered by a magnitude 6.7 earthquake, so shallow its force reached the surface in seconds, setting off TSUNAMI warnings, urgent evacuations, and a wave of fear that echoed memories of disaster. Authorities raced to decode what came next. Would this be the moment everyone has dreaded, or the day Japan's high-tech warning system would face its ultimate test? At 7:10 p.m. local time, seismic stations across Japan registered a sudden spike as a magnitude 6.8 earthquake erupted beneath the Pacific just off the Sanriku coast of Iwate Prefecture. Within seconds, the ground trembled violently, sending shockwaves through coastal cities and rural villages alike. The quake's focus lay only 16 kilometers below the ocean floor, shallow enough for its energy to surge straight to the surface. In Yamata, Ofunato, Kuji, and dozens of smaller communities, the shaking lasted just over a minute, rattling windows, toppling shelves, and setting off a chorus of car alarms. Japan's meteorological agency's automated network kicked into action. By 7:16 p.m., a tsunami advisory flashed across television screens and mobile phones in Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima prefectures. The warning called for immediate evacuation from low-lying areas, specifying the risk of waves up to 1 meter. Sirens wailed along the coast, and emergency loudspeakers urged residents to move uphill or seek refuge in designated towers. In train stations, the Tohoku Shinkansen screeched to a halt. Power flickered in some neighborhoods, but the grid held steady. As the region braced for the worst, tide gauges installed after the 2011 disaster began relaying real-time data. At 7:52 p.m., Kuji Port registered a sea level rise of 20 centimeters, enough to confirm the tsunami's arrival, but far from catastrophic. Minutes later, Ofunato's sensors recorded a similar reading. The waves swept over some fishing docks and washed debris onto roads, but did not breach seawalls or cause major flooding. Throughout the evening, aftershocks rippled beneath the sea. 11 tremors were logged in the first 2 hours alone, including a magnitude 6.3 jolt that rattled nerves but left infrastructure intact. By 8:15 p.m., with no further rise in water levels and no reports of significant inundation, the meteorological agency lifted the tsunami advisory. No deaths or serious injuries were reported. Municipal offices fielded calls about cracked walls and fallen tiles, but the region's reinforced buildings and disaster drills had done their job. For many, the most lasting impact was the memory of the alerts, their phones buzzing, the sirens blaring, the uneasy wait for confirmation that the ocean's threat had passed. The numbers told a stark story. A magnitude 6.8 quake, 16 kilometers deep, waves of 20 centimeters, and a warning system that moved faster than the sea itself. Inside the Japan Meteorological Agency operations room, a network of sensors and algorithms works around the clock, waiting for the first hint of seismic unrest. When the Sanriku quake struck, the system's seismographs instantly recorded the initial P waves, the faint, fast-moving tremors that precede the main shaking. In less than 10 seconds, automated models parsed the incoming data, pinpointing the hypocenter and estimating the magnitude. This rapid-fire calculation is the backbone of Japan's early warning system, designed to give as much notice as possible, sometimes just seconds, before the strongest shaking and any potential tsunami. The process begins with more than 8,000 seismic stations feeding live data into central servers. As soon as a cluster of stations detects abnormal ground motion, the system triangulates the epicenter. Sophisticated algorithms compare the pattern against thousands of historical quakes, seeking confirmation that this is a real event, not a false alarm. If the magnitude exceeds a critical threshold, typically around 6.5 for offshore quakes, with some macron, the system automatically triggers a chain reaction. Tsunami models fire up, and the advisory protocol kicks in. Tsunami risk is modeled in parallel, using both real-time seismograph readings and coastal tide gauge data. The models simulate wave propagation, factoring in the unique topography of the Sanriku coast. If any scenario projects a wave height of 1 meter or more at any monitored point, the system issues a tsunami advisory. This threshold, lowered after the 2011 disaster, errs on the side of caution, prioritizing public safety over the risk of unnecessary alarms. Within 20 seconds of the quake's detection, the first internal alerts appear on forecasters' screens. JMA staff review the automated output, confirm the parameters, and, if warranted, authorize the advisory for public release. Communication officers activate J-Alert, Japan's national warning system, which pushes notifications to television, radio, mobile phones, and municipal loudspeakers in at-risk areas. The entire process, from seismic detection to public advisory, can take as little as 1 minute, depending on the event's clarity and complexity. The November 9 response followed this protocol precisely. The initial advisory, warning of possible 1-meter waves, was issued less than 6 minutes after the main shock. Tide gauges and dart buoys continued to relay data, allowing forecasters to update or cancel the advisory as more information became available. The system's speed relies on automation, but final decisions always pass through human hands. JMA forecasters trained to interpret the flood of numbers and make judgment calls when the models disagree. This blend of automation and expert oversight forms the backbone of Japan's disaster readiness. Every link in the chain, from seismic sensors to public alerts, reflects lessons learned from past failures and near misses. The goal is simple: turn seconds of raw data into actionable warnings, buying precious time for those in harm's way. Long before warnings blared from loudspeakers and smartphones, the Takahashi family's fate was tied to the tides and seasons of Yamada. Their story, like so many along the Sanriku coast, is written in the rhythms of fishing boats, the morning auctions, and the memory of a day that redrew the line between land and sea. In March 2011, the earth shook with a force few could imagine. The Takahashis lost their patriarch that afternoon. He had gone back to the harbor, hoping to save a boat, and never returned. More than 18,500 people died that spring, and nearly every family in Yamada, a town of 15,000, counted a loss. The family's home, perched just meters above the old tide line, vanished beneath the wave. Only a single photograph survived, found days later in a muddy field, its edges curled by salt water. Years passed in temporary housing. Community meetings stretched late into the night, debating whether to rebuild behind the new seawall or move uphill, away from the graves and the sea. The Takahashis, like many, chose to return. Their rebuilt home stands in the shadow of concrete, its windows facing a horizon now hidden. The catch never fully recovered. Some mornings, the auction house feels too quiet, the old jokes echoing off empty crates. The youngest daughter, once a schoolgirl clutching her bag as she ran for high ground, now helps run the family business. She keeps the evacuation map taped inside the kitchen cupboard. A silent reminder. On November 9, 2025, when the ground began to shake, the Takahashis moved, without hesitation. The grandfather's words, "Don't wait, just run," had become a family creed. The evacuation order reached their phones in seconds, the sirens following soon after. They gathered essentials in minutes: a radio, bottled water, a faded photograph, and the family dog, who refused to leave the doorway at first. The digital evacuation log shows their departure at 7:18 in the evening, arrival at the nearest tower by 7:36. Social media posts from that night capture the tension. The grandchildren lined up on the cold concrete, faces lit by phone screens. The dog's leash wrapped tight around a wrist. The wharf, battered but standing, was visible in the distance, illuminated by emergency floodlights. This time, the tsunami was mercifully small, just enough to swamp the lower docks and scatter gear. Still, the auction was canceled for 2 days, and one of the boats was found half a kilometer inland, wedged in a rice field. The loss was temporary, but the unease lingered. For the Takahashis, every siren and tremor recalls the day when warnings came too late. Yet as dawn broke and families returned to homes spared by luck and concrete, the old debates resumed. Is the wall enough? Are the towers safe? Should the next generation stay or go? The Takahashi family story is not just one of survival, but of living with the sea's promise and threat. Their choices, when to run, when to rebuild, when to remember, echo through Yamada and along the entire Sanriku coast, shaping what it means to call this place home. The Sanriku coast stretches like a jagged ribbon along northeastern Honshu, its shoreline carved by ancient tectonic forces into a maze of deep, narrow inlets. From the air, these bays seem almost serene, emerald fingers of sea reaching inland between steep green hills. But beneath this beauty lies a deadly secret. The very shape that draws fishing boats to safe harbor also magnifies the power of the ocean in moments of crisis. Sanriku's inlets are classic examples of Ria coastlines. Over millennia, rivers and glaciers cut deep valleys into the land. When sea levels rose, these valleys flooded, creating the long, funnel-shaped bays that now define the region. Places like Miyako, Ofunato, and Kamaishi are built at the heads of these inlets, their harbors shielded from storms, but exposed to another far greater threat: tsunami amplification. When a tsunami races toward the Sanriku coast, the open ocean wave might seem harmless, barely a ripple, just centimeters high. But as the wave enters the narrowing mouth of a bay, its energy is squeezed into a smaller and smaller space. Water piles up, the wave grows taller, and its speed slows. But its force multiplies. By the time it reaches the town at the bay's end, the wave can tower several meters above normal sea level, transforming a distant earthquake into a local catastrophe. History offers grim testimony to this effect. In 1896, a magnitude 8.5 earthquake far offshore generated a tsunami that struck Sanriku with almost no warning. The wave, amplified by the coast's geometry, reached heights of up to 38 meters in some bays, higher than a 12-story building. Entire villages were swept away. More than 22,000 people died, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in Japanese history. Survivors remembered the sea receding in silence, then returning as a black wall, swallowing everything in its path. Just 37 years later, in 1933, another offshore quake sent a tsunami surging through the same inlets. This time, the wave reached 28 meters at some points along the coast. Over 3,000 lives were lost, many in towns that had rebuilt on the same vulnerable ground. These tragedies cemented Sanriku's reputation among scientists and emergency planners as one of the most dangerous coastlines in the world for tsunami risk. The amplification mechanism is now well understood. As a tsunami enters a bay, the narrowing channel and steep underwater slopes focus the wave's energy. Much like a megaphone amplifies a whisper into a shout. Even a moderate offshore quake, if it strikes at the wrong angle or depth, can send a lethal surge ashore. The lesson is clear. In Sanriku, the very features that create natural beauty also create extraordinary hazard. Every generation here grows up with stories of vanished villages and the silent approach of the sea, knowing that the shape of their home is both a gift and a threat. Today, this knowledge shapes every discussion about coastal safety. Engineers debate how high to build seawalls, how to design evacuation routes that climb quickly out of the flood zone, and whether it is possible to live with the sea rather than simply defend against it. For the people of Sanriku, the question is not whether the ocean will rise again, but when, and whether they will be ready when it does. 10 aftershocks followed the main quake, each one a jolt that reminded residents and scientists alike that the crisis was not over. Seismology logs from the Japan Meteorological Agency tracked these tremors in real time, mapping a scattered pattern of stress release beneath the Sanriku coast. Most aftershocks were small, but one, measuring magnitude 6.3, stood out, its energy strong enough to rattle nerves across Iwate and Miyagi. The sequence revealed a puzzle. Instead of a single, clean rupture along the fault, the energy seemed to disperse across multiple patches, as if the Earth were coming apart in a series of slips and catches. Dr. Takashi Saga, a leading seismologist at Kyoto University, described the phenomenon with a simple analogy. He said the fault behaves more like Velcro than a zipper. Multiple points stick and slip rather than tearing all at once. His team reviewed data from the RV Kaimei, Japan's advanced seafloor research vessel, which had been deployed to monitor crustal movement after the quake. Early readings suggested a mosaic of small ruptures rather than a single break, complicating the seismic picture and raising questions about what might come next. This patchwork rupture carries unsettling implications. When a fault releases its energy in scattered bursts, it leaves behind pockets of strain, unstable zones that could slip again without warning. For coastal communities, the science translates into uncertainty. Aftershocks may continue for days, and the possibility of another significant quake cannot be dismissed. Each tremor strains already stressed infrastructure and keeps the region on edge, turning the aftermath into an ongoing test of readiness and resilience. Japan's vigilance in the face of seismic risk extends far beyond evacuation drills and seawalls. Nowhere is this more evident than in the country's nuclear sector. After the 2011 disaster, every reactor along the Pacific coast was retrofitted with advanced seismic sensors and automated shutdown protocols. On November 9th, all northeastern reactors responded exactly as designed. Systems detected the earthquake, triggered safety checks, and confirmed that critical thresholds were never approached. No official records from the Nuclear Regulation Authority or plant operators indicate any reactor, including the much scrutinized Reactor 2, neared a dangerous limit. Post-event logs show routine shutdowns, stable readings, and no breach of safety margins. This transparency is intentional, a direct response to public demands for open reporting after Fukushima. But the margin for error remains slim. Engineers and regulators review incident logs after every event, knowing that even a minor systems failure could have consequences. The reality is stark. Japan sits atop one of the world's most active subduction zones. Each year, more than 1,500 earthquakes are recorded nationwide. Yet magnitude 6 or greater earthquakes, like the one that struck Sanriku, are rare. They occur on average only once every 16 months. Seismologists warn that the probability of a magnitude 8 or larger event along the Japanese arc stands at 70 to 80% within the next 30 years. These odds are not abstract. They shape building codes, emergency planning, and daily habits. Professor Hiroshi Kimura of Tohoku University puts it plainly: we live above a restless Earth. Technology has bought us time, not safety. His synthesis of decades of seismic data, engineering advances, and cultural memory forms the backbone of Japan's preparedness. The lesson is clear. Resilience is not a one-time achievement, but a continuous mandate. Every system, from nuclear plants to evacuation towers, is only as strong as the vigilance that maintains it. For Japan, the question is never if another disaster will come, but whether society will be ready when it does. Japan sits atop one of the most volatile seams on Earth, where tectonic pressure never truly rests. Each new quake is a reminder. Over 120 million lives depend on constant vigilance, rapid warning systems, and hard-won lessons. As the ground shifts beneath our feet, resilience is not just history. It is the only way forward.